All right, time for our Dollar Dialogue segment. And this week we're talking about a new Aussie finance book that's hitting the shelves, which offers itself up as a practical guide to building long-term financial security. It's called Set for Life, and it's the third book from Aussie buyer's agent, property investor, and CEO of Oz Property Professionals, Lloyd Edge, who I'm pleased to say joins us now. G'day, Lloyd. Welcome to the Savings Tip Jar podcast.
G'day, Dom. Really nice to be with you.
Yes, welcome back, we should say. You have been a guest many years ago on the Savings Tip Jar. So you know the drum, Lloyd. Give us your savings tip.
Well, Denise, I think my savings tip would have to be stop the Uber Eats, because that takes up quite a lot of cash. And I notice that a lot because we get that on a Friday and a Saturday night. So people often don't understand where all their money goes, and often it goes on some of that takeaway thing. So I think really curb that spending a bit on the Uber Eats on the Friday and the Saturday nights.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with you that one there. Based on my own experience, before we bought this place, we lived in an area that we were basically above shops. We lived in a little apartment above shops, and there was just all these lovely restaurants below us, all different types of cuisines, and every night we'd smell all the smells, and we'd be so tempted. And obviously, with it right at our doorstep, we were getting. We were picking up, Uber Eats, actually, even though we could have just walked across and picked it up ourselves.
Yeah, you get it delivered, right? Yeah, it's so nice. The flavors just smell so nice, and I can't resist them. And we often get them even on a Thursday night after I pick up the kids from martial arts or something. And there's Indian next door, we'll just go grab some, and we're terrible like that. But I'm terrible like that, and also coffee is a bit of a I love my coffee, but I often say to people, instead of having 3 coffees a day, just buy one coffee, maybe make it another one at home or something to save money that way.
Yeah, for sure. But one way to force yourself out of it is do what I did and move to a semi-rural area where there's basically no Uber Eats available, because I'm out in the Gold Coast hinterland, and it's I think there is Uber Eats available, but from very few restaurants, and it's very, very expensive compared to just picking it up yourself. So that's definitely cut our Uber Eats budget for sure. All right, so let's get into the crux of this this chat here about your new book, Set for Life. Just firstly, what inspired you to write it, and secondly, understand you probably don't want to give too much away to prospective readers, but just for those potential readers, what's in this book and how can it help them?
Yeah, so this book is a little bit different, in fact, quite different to my first books, possibly again by now, in the fact that this is not just about property strategies. It's really about how people can set themselves up financially, whether it's through property or whether it's through other types of investments like shares and things. I also talk about generational wealth and things like that. So it's really about being able to set yourself up so that you can live the life that you want moving forward. And I talk a lot about savings and how to save money moving forward to get yourself in a better position. I talk about what I call the Freedom Fund, which is essentially a different account to put some money into, saving 10 or 15% of your income, for example, into a different account that you can then not spend, and you can use that later on to invest, to sort of build your lifestyle and things like that. And there's something in there for everyone. So whether you're in your 20s and you're just starting out, or whether you're in your 30s, more established, you're growing a family, or in your 40s and you're looking to maybe start to downsize and things like that, or for some people they may be buying their dream home at that stage, but then also looking to sort of invest and set themselves up for the future. So it's really looking at different strategies, different scenarios, and using a lot of case studies as well, because people love real life stories. So I've used a lot of real life stories in there, and also put myself on the chopping block as well. I've used myself as an example as well.
Yeah, I thought that's I think what made the book really readable for me is that there was a lot of the real life stuff, and I agree, people do like that. And you make the point in the book that we can't just be going out, saving up our deposit, buying a house and spending 30 years paying off our mortgage. And why can't we do that anymore?
Yeah, so the problem with that, and that comes back to what we've been taught many years ago by our forebears, so our parents, grandparents, where, you go to school, you get good grades, you get taught to go to university, and then you get a job, and you work your job for 40 years so you can buy a house, pay it off, and you can retire at the end. These days, people really want to be able to enjoy life a little bit more, and I know I certainly have wanted to be in that situation. So getting a job at 25 or 23 and then you're working and then paying off that mortgage and then trying to enjoy life when you're 65, when you're starting to, maybe feel a little bit older, having troubles with arthritis, all that sort of stuff doesn't really work. So I feel that you need to be in a situation where you can get, you can buy your dream home as part of your strategy, but actually look at how you can actually pay that off sooner. For me, getting in and doing some investments. So if we do use property as the example there, rent investing is a great way of getting in. So rather than struggling, and if you're living in a capital city, expensive places like Sydney, Melbourne or Brisbane, for example, rather than getting in and trying to buy that home, spending as much as you can and then being mortgaged to the hilt, it's better to get in by by a cheaper investment. You can rent where you want to live, where you're close to work, buy an investment property somewhere else, and then have the tenants essentially pay off that mortgage. But the equity in that property then will grow, so you can use that as a deposit to get into your next property. So essentially, you don't need to keep saving for a deposit for each property. And with the right strategy, you could buy 2 or 3 properties with the same amount of borrowing capacity that you might have had to spend on just that one dream home. But you got yourself in a better situation because you bought a few properties, which over time are going to get growth, and then you can leverage off them to get yourself into your dream home later on. So rather than feeling that you need to have that perfect home at 25, why not get there when you're 38? Or in your 40s, for example. So that's what I like to encourage people to do. But also, by the time you do get there, you're in a situation where you can then pay that home off quicker because you're in a much better financial position to start with.
Yeah, I did find it interesting that reading that in the book, because I'm someone that did follow the more traditional path, and it did sort of have me sort of questioning. I was like, did I make the right move there? But I also kind of thought, is that rent investing strategy really for everyone? Like, doesn't it depend on their lifestyle situation? Because so like you said, in the book, you're advising against buying a home to live in, recommend rent investing instead. But yeah, my partner and I, we spent the best part of 10 years saving up a deposit and investing in shares and ETFs before eventually buying our dream home just over 4 years ago. But yeah, I can't say I have too many regrets. Now we've got a couple of young kids and I see them running around the reasonably large backyard, and we've got a creek running down the back. So yeah, really in essence, what is so wrong about buying your own home before buying a property investment? Is it mainly just from a financial point of view rather than lifestyle point of view?
It's probably more financial there, because if you do buy your own home before you got any investments, you're basically maxing yourself out. So, and just using some numbers, let's say you buy yourself a home, it's going to cost you 1.5 mil. You put down your deposit, you end up with a 1.2 mil mortgage, for example. You maxed out there, and you're paying that mortgage there. So that, along with all the other cost of living expenses and stuff. People can get quite stressed out and think, this is costing me a fortune. I'm going to be paying this for the next 30 years. Now, the difference there is that for that same budget, you can get yourself a couple of good investment properties in different locations where the rent is virtually covering the mortgage. If you're getting the right property, the right strategy, and therefore you're not essentially paying a mortgage. Your tenants are paying the mortgage. Yes, you are paying rent if you're going to be rent investing. However, you have got a growth occurring in the properties that you've got. So it's just sort of flipping things around so that later on you might be able to buy a little bit more of a substantial home. Because what I've found with people when they're trying to get into their dream home when they're really young, it says there's a limit to what they can afford, because at that age there's a limit to their incomes and how much deposit they've saved up and things like that. So if you're maxing yourself out and all you can afford is to have a small apartment, sometimes like I've met people that have a family of 4 and they're living in a 1-bedroom apartment because that's what they can afford. And those people have come to me and they've come with a bit of a regret, saying, I wish I was renting and I could have just spent that money on a investment property somewhere else and have built some growth that way. So they're the things that we that I like to address from that perspective. It's just about building some wealth and then looking at how you can get there financially in the future. But it really does come down from strategy. So it's not just about getting out and buying a home or buying an investment, but it's about setting out a plan and looking at, well, where do you want to be in the next 10, 15 years with your, with your family, with your financial goals? What do you want to achieve? in terms of passive income. If you've got kids, do you need to account for school fees? Are you putting them through private schools, or even if it's public school, there's still expenses for uniforms and school excursions. Putting that all into a plan, and then looking at how you're going to be able to finance that is really important, and that can often then dictate what path you should go down, whether you should be investing, whether you should be buying your own home.
I'm going to have to bring up the big elephant in the room, Lloyd, and you're a property guy. Federal government tax changes for investors, and not just property investors. They seem to be the hardest hit, but all investors have been hit with some changes out of that federal budget, particularly SMSFs, which I know you've spoken about in your book. How does this shift things? Is this still a viable path for people to take?
Yeah, well, I definitely think that property is still definitely a viable path for people to take. So we need to take a step back from that. And so the government is proposing these changes, saying that they're trying to help first home buyers get into the market by lowering the prices of property. Essentially, that's what they're trying to do, and make things more affordable. They're not really looking at the bigger picture or trying to tackle what the bigger picture is. The bigger picture is the lack of supply of property around the country. So if we look at the fact that net migration in Australia at the moment stands at over 300,000, and there's only 180,000 homes being built each year in Australia, there is still not enough supply of property to keep up with demand, because people need somewhere to live. So it doesn't matter what's happening with tax changes and all sorts of government intervention. At the end of the day, you need more property. And as well as that, there are things like the red tape around building approvals. It is hard to get DAs out of council sometimes, and then construction costs are expensive, and there's a lot of red tape around developers being able to get things approved. There's a lot of that sort of stuff that the government is not actually tackling. So they're just putting these band-aid measures on that is not really tackling the full issue. So from that perspective, regardless of tax outcomes, the properties generally around the country, especially in the right location, are still going to get good growth because they're going to be in demand. People are going to want to buy and want to live there. But one of the biggest things that I think we are going to see is an increase in rents. And now we saw that back in the mid-80s, 1985, the Hawke Keating government did the same thing. They abolished negative gearing, and then we saw rents increase over a couple of years there, and they had to then bring negative gearing back in 1987 because there was just such an I guess a backlash from the community, but also the rents are increasing. And I think the same thing's going to happen here, because there will be inevitably less property investors buying properties for the time being, but that is just going to have the negative effect that the rents are going to get more expensive for people who are renting. So it's not going to have anything positive from that perspective.
Yeah, I did see some reports coming out recently showing that rents have started to pick up quite substantially. And I just sort of think, is this revenge of the landlords for all those tax changes that came in the federal budget? But there's also a lot of reports of this, the property market now being in a downturn, and the prices are falling. Do you think we're currently in a property market downturn? And if so, how long will this downturn last? And also, is this a buying opportunity for other investors?
Yeah, 100%. So we definitely are in a downturn in many areas. But that's not a bad thing, because property markets always go through cycles. Now, a property market cycle generally lasts from anywhere between 7 to 13 years, depending on the market and what's happening in the market. The other thing to keep in mind is there's over 15,300 suburbs in Australia. So not everything is in a downturn. So we are seeing really low auction clearance rates at the moment in Sydney. We've seen them drop a lot in Melbourne. But of course, Melbourne and Sydney are the biggest cities for auctions. So outside of that, it's not such a big thing. So we're always talking about auction clearance rates, but you don't get that all around the country. I'm also seeing in a lot of the regional markets that they are still in demand. And there's still a fair bit of growth happening there because of the price points. There are still people getting out and buying. To some extent, that's maybe slightly artificial because there has been the changes to the SMSF. So a lot of people are out there buying SMSF properties in which they need to sign a contract on before the 10th of August. So that's pushing up demand for those type of properties as well. But so not everywhere is falling from that perspective, but we are certainly coming into a buyer's market. But that's also a good opportunity, because we can look like similar things happened at the start of COVID. the market started to fall, nobody knew what was happening. Those that got in and actually started to buy did really, really well during that period. And the same happened with the GFC in 2008. The market got soft, but those that decided to hold their properties through there and then buy ended up doing really, really well. Sometimes people make the error of thinking they need to buy when the market's booming, but that's actually the wrong time to buy because you pay too much. There's too much competition. So you need to buy when the market is softer. Is that if there are less buyers around and the market's dropping, that's when you want to get in and actually try to nab a really good opportunity.
Yes, I was thinking it's a good time to read your book, actually, with the market being a little bit slower and people not having that frenzy of thinking that they have to sign contracts straight away. So maybe it is good timing for your book after all, and just factor in that taxes. And I think you make the point in your book that governments change goalposts and rules and taxes all the time, and that's just a fact of life. So thanks very much for joining us today, Lloyd. It was a great chat, and I think, property is still to go by the sound.
Oh, look, it definitely go for me. I'm in the market for another property myself at the moment. I think it's a great opportunity, but it's been a pleasure, and thanks for having me on.
Cheers, Lloyd. Appreciate your insights. But yes, I think it was Warren Buffett that said, what did he say? Buy when others are fearful and sell when others are greedy. So I think that might be applicable in this situation. That's it. Good stuff. Thanks, Lloyd. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks, Lloyd.